Welcome to Dulles. We're a community of faith that embodies the love of Jesus for the good of our neighbor and renewal of our world. We're so glad you're listening.
In the 90s, a brand product ran a whole slew of ads, and they just became so ubiquitous that some of us had some of these ads memorized. Sprite ran this series of ads. Image is nothing. It's thirst that's everything. And this was to counter this branding idea that really became a cliche all through our culture that image is everything. It became a marketing slogan. Marketing companies really, they actually built their company and their whole set of strategies or vision and mission on the idea that actually what sells, what works, what changes people is image. Image is everything. And so Sprite cleverly was like, no, it's your thirst is everything. Image is nothing. Well, it may surprise you. Maybe. We talk about this a lot here at Dulles. But maybe it'll surprise you to hear that God believes image actually is everything. It actually is. In fact, we've just read two instances in the old ancient scriptures of the Old Covenant and in the New Testament. This ubiquitous, constant language about image and its role in our lives and its relationship to God, our Creator. We mortal humans, we warp this idea that image is important and image should matter to us. We warp it into being about our own image. Oh, image is everything. It's about my image. It's about my appearance. It's about the persona that I put on social media. There's a whole lot we could say about the Met Gala. There's things I really like about the Met Gala, and there's something in it that just kind of speaks to what we're talking about today, that it's all about us. It's all about the image that I portray. Yes, your primary role in life on this earth as a friend, as a mom, as a dad, as a thinker, a communicator, a philanthropist, an entrepreneur, as an employee, as a designer, as a traveler, is to reflect the image of God. To actually image, the word is to image God. But there's a problem, and it's a big one. You were created to reflect God. You were created to reflect our Creator God, to reflect our Father. In your relationships, in your language, in your view of the world, your view of the future. But how often do we hear our own words? We feel our own anxiety. We know that we're not speaking confidence of what is true. Instead, we're wrapped up in worry. Or we walk past the mirror and just not recognize God in ourselves. Michael Jordan, of course, I've got this description here, who Michael Jordan was, as if I need to read that. Considered the greatest basketball player of all time. Maybe one of the great, one of the great athletes, but maybe the greatest athlete of all time, that could be argued. Well, his son Marcus, we don't talk about Marcus Jordan a whole lot. Marcus Jordan was incredibly talented in high school basketball, went to the University of Central Florida, and the assumption was, here comes the next great. Oh my gosh, we're going to possibly see Marcus fill the shoes, no pun intended, of his dad. Marcus actually never went any further than UCF, never made it to the NBA. The GOAT, the true GOAT in football among quarterbacks, of course, is Joe Montana. The greatest quarterback of all time. Well, Nate Montana had so much potential, this young, amazing, remarkable quarterback, bounced around different colleges, and never made it to the NFL. There's something about this assumption that a daughter will so image the mother, and then there's heartache when there's some kind of derailing or disappointment or not living up to the expectation, or the same of a son not living up to what the father had set as the bar. We were created to reflect God, our Father. But let's be honest, we don't always look or behave like him. And that's no secret. We're honest about that here. That's one, I hope, is a trait of our church, that we are transparent about who we are not yet, but who can make us that person. Sometimes what we reflect is not the image of God, it's impatience, or it's pride, or it's ugly words, or self-centeredness. We sometimes relate much more to the Old Testament Israelites and how God's people often looked nothing like him. But there's good news. There's actually remarkable news. Someone has done it. Someone has actually done it. Someone came and gave the earth and gave all humans the image of God, and they did so perfectly. Colossians chapter 1, the Apostle Paul, God is writing through the early apostles and inspired the Apostle Paul to write to this young church. Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. For through him, God created everything in the heavens and here on earth. And you could go to John, and there's other places where you actually find out that Jesus was the creator. The Father actually created through Jesus. We tend to think, well, God the Father created in the Genesis story, and then we just wait. We wait for all those thousands of years for Jesus to finally appear. Well, actually, we're told in many references that Jesus was the actual author of creation. And this author of creation would become the visible image of the invisible God. I sit often with people who are grappling with faith and are trying to just connect the dots. And a common theme, a common question that will be asked is, how can you worship? Sometimes I see you singing songs, you'll close your eyes. People have actually, for you that might be normal. You, as a worshiper, but there are those who gather with us and those who are really seeking and trying to connect with God, and they'll say, I see you singing a song, and you close your eyes in singing as if you're singing to this God that, to me, is just invisible. And inevitably, we'll end up talking about, well, Jesus has made him visible. We know what God is like because Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. Where we fail to reflect God, Jesus succeeds completely, perfectly. I want to look at this verse one more time. Christ is the visible image. That word image is the Greek word. What Paul uses here is the Greek word eikon. Eikon, it's translated image. It's sometimes translated differently depending on the context. Christ is the visible image, the eikon of the invisible God. Eikon means exact likeness or portrait. That's literally what this word image means, the exact likeness or portrait. Now, if you get stuck on the word portrait, you could think, well, that's not exact likeness, that's a painting. That's not, you're looking at a painting. But remember, Paul is writing in a day where there's no photography, there's no video technology, obviously. Did you know that? Did I need to say that? There, 2,000 years ago. And the idea is that you're discussing an emperor or a prince or someone of prominence in a region hundreds or thousands of miles away, and so you want to know what they look like. Oh, are they tall? Are they short? What do they look? What is their hair? And so you would often get a sketch. It'd be some kind of crude sketch of the person. You kind of get a rough idea. This was just normal. This is how we saw the world, hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago. And in the rare case that someone could see the original, the portrait would travel hundreds of miles, the original. Not a sketch of the original, not a drawing of a person that looked like the person, the original. And how rare and what a privilege to actually see the original. It's kind of like, the Mona Lisa hanging in a living room in Herndon or hanging in an office in Purcellville. You're seeing a copy, but when you're actually in the Louvre, when you're actually standing in front of the original, you're seeing the authentic. That's the idea here. If photography existed in Paul's day, he would have been using photography language, like you're looking at the original. And the original actually became animated and came to life. We could see him, we could hear his words, we could hear the descriptions of who God is and how he reacts. We were created, you and I were created in the image of God, but Jesus is the image of God. We were made in the likeness of God. Jesus is the likeness. He is the original. Jesus shows you what God is like and what you are meant to be like. This is what you were designed to be. Your purpose in this world, whether you choose to accept it or not, whether you like it or not, the ultimate filling of your desires of someday I'd like to travel to, or someday in my career, what I'd like to amass, what I'd like to collect, what I'd like to accomplish, that inner desire that we all have, there's nothing that matches wanting to be the image of God. This is what you were designed to be, and you will try another car. You'll try another technology. You'll change jobs again to try to fill that ultimate purpose that finally settles us like, I was designed to reflect the person of God, the nature of God, the character of God, the creativity of God, the relational aspect of God. The world is full of people wanting to be better, trying to be better people. We hear that a lot. We say that. Maybe you've said it or said it recently. I hear it often. I'm just trying to be a better person. Isn't that what God wants? He just wants me to try to be a better person. No. Actually, someone who says that refrain doesn't really understand one of the overarching themes of the New Testament. You can't. In minute ways, you can, in your own effort, improve. You can improve, become a better listener, and we have to work hard at these things, don't we? Like to make some minuscule progress where you say, you know what, I think I've become a better listener. I don't react quite. It takes hard work and hard focus, and we can move the dial a few degrees. But you are not called by our God to try harder to be a better person. God says through the Apostle Paul that you fail to do that. You and I fail trying to be better. Last week we talked about how Star Wars is a picture of darkness that attempts to seduce us from external, from the outside, and darkness is actually something that's already in us. And we went through some scenes last week, and I think that's now been posted online if you want to catch up or if you missed last week. Paul says that you and I, every human, we have fallen short of God's glorious standard. Now, that's heavenly kind of language. When I was a kid in church, I would hear glorious standard and just think of sunshine beams or something, But glory is this word that means substance, the substance of something. If you're talking about a big moment in sports and you watch the video back and it's the crowd loses their mind and it's this iconic moment, that's literally what glory means. Like that's the substance of their career or what they've accomplished. It happened in that moment, and then it happened again. There it is again. That's what glory means. God has this weighty substance in his character, in his heart, in his power that is supposed to be emulated in us and through us. But we've fallen short of God's glorious, that substantive standard or expectation. And nothing we can do can mend that. He has to do something. There's something our God has to do to bridge this gap between what we are supposed to be, the intention, what we all still ache to be, and us actually becoming that image or reflection of God. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3, the Son, Jesus, is the radiance of God's glory. Here's that language again. He's the radiance of God's substance, the substance of God's heart, of what makes God who he is. And he is the exact representation of his being. Jesus is the image. He is the original. Jesus doesn't just resemble God, he is the perfect picture of him. You want to know how God treats people who carry guilt? You want to know how God treats people who feel shame and guilt? Look at Jesus. Read Jesus. Listen to his words. So many people, person after person, are like, you should be judging me and you're having mercy? You're calling me friend? Want to know what God thinks about worry and confidence? Look to and listen to Jesus. Want to know how God tells someone that they're wrong and they need to refocus? Look to Jesus. Want to know what God values? Watch Jesus with the poor or the proud or broken people. In John 14, again, another, I'm kind of proof texting here with just some single verses. I don't often do that, but it's just so constant throughout the narrative of the New Testament. John 14, Jesus said, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. You are seeing God when you look at me. You worry about that thing from your past and God's judgment or anger, look at me. Look at me, hear my words, you'll see God. You'll see God's heart for you. I was just talking with somebody recently, maybe a month ago, about guilt, and this thing, it just haunts them. And yes, Brad, I know God's love, and we ended up, I centered them on Jesus on the cross, praying for the people who crucified him. It is remarkable how your paradigm of God's anger or God's wrath, or he's a God of judge, how it level sets when you actually look at the image of God in Jesus. And sometimes it takes that focus of an instance of Jesus in his words, or him on the cross praying for the people. You realize he's dying for the sins of those, the brokenness of those who've actually crucified him. What a merciful God. Sometimes it takes that image to open us up to God's forgiveness, or God seeing beauty in us, or calling us his child. When Jesus said, anyone who's seen me has seen the Father, this isn't just a teaching. This isn't just a point that Jesus is making. It's a relational invitation. When Jesus says, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father, he's inviting us into relationship with God. He's saying, look at me. This is what God is really like. This is who God really is. So you can actually know God. That's the whole purpose of looking at him. So you can know him. But then, when I grew up in church, that's kind of where it stopped. I see Jesus so I can know God, but then I'm going to go back to work, or then I'm going to pursue my college career. And then, yeah, that's right, I want to get to heaven someday, so I want to know. No, we see Jesus so we can know God, so then we can fulfill our destiny, our longing, what we crave, which is to image the reality of God, to reflect who God is. Because Jesus perfectly images the Father, the more you know him, the more you understand who God is and who you are called to be. Last year, I mentioned the true idea of a temple. We kind of see temples as these old relics of religious, there's all different types of temples around the world. And they're just kind of these random places of worship. Not really understanding in the ancient world what a temple actually represented. Where you have God space intersecting with human space is a temple. And this is what defines Eden as a temple. God made his earth to be a temple where he and humans would intersect, and you and I would be the actual translation. Now, hear me here. The translation of putting that image in a temple is idol. You and I are actually God's designated image that he's chosen. The Old Testament temple of the Israelites is the only temple in ancient civilization that had no image, no golden image, no statues, nothing that represented the image of God, because you and I were always intended to be the image of God. And I had not seen this clip until just this past week. I was looking for something to back up my whole take on this, and thank goodness N.T. Wright was way, way, way ahead of any of us on this. The earth is God's temple. You are the image intended to show what God looks like. When Brad, imperfect Brad, who needs encouragement sometimes or needs to hear the wisdom of God or see a picture of God's good and needs to experience God, what is a Brad to do? He sees a Kim Pizzoli. And he says, that's what God's heart looks like. That's an image of God's patience. Or I see an Anike or a Sean. That's what God sounds like in this stressful moment. That's the heart of God. That's the good of God. God doesn't change his calling or purpose for us, even when we abdicate or reject it. His calling still remains. So God himself came to be and show what a God imager should look like in human form. And now we're called to become like Jesus. Now we have the words of God, the picture of God, as our metric in Jesus. He's our source. He's the portrait. He's the original. 2 Corinthians 3:18, the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. This is still the purpose of God for you. Even in your imperfections, or if you want to disqualify yourself, well, Brad, yeah, good, long-standing Christians, they can image God, but you don't understand my story. Do you know how many times I've heard people say that? Do you know how many times I've tried to say that? I'm disqualified. He still calls this purpose out of you. He still says to you and announces to you, this is my design for you. Jesus came to successfully fulfill the purpose of humans, to reflect the very image of God. Now you are called to be transformed into his likeness by looking at Jesus, by allowing the heart of Jesus to action, not just studying him, but allowing his heart to change your heart. This is an invitation. This is where you allow. This is where you invite. This is where you surrender control and you say, God, change me. Make me like you. By listening to Jesus, inviting him, by practicing Jesus. Transformation doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from allowing Jesus to, the Greek word Paul used was metamorphose. Metamorphose, to be transformed. We're actually to experience this metamorphosis by Jesus' love and power working in us. Jesus is the perfect image that we were always meant to reflect. When we image Jesus in our everyday lives, through love, truth, justice, through grace, through our words, our imaginations of what could be made better, when we do this, the world sees God more clearly. When you are incrementally becoming more of the image of God, more of the reflection of Jesus, our world is so desperate for the right image. And why we keep trying to find it in politics, it's just beyond me. No one would say, well, I'm trying to find God's image in politics, but yet we practice that way. Our craving is to see what actually Jesus came to reflect. I'm going to close here, and I think Adam and Fiamma are going to come lead a final song as we respond to God. And Anike said this question. She said, for people who who struggle with, well, if I begin imaging God, if I begin this path, this relationship with God for the purpose of actually looking more like him, does this mean that I have to be perfection? There's no more stumbling. There's no more bad moments. And we talked about how in the New Testament we're given the picture of a mirror where the mirror is smudged and dirty and you can kind of barely see through it. And then God's cleansing, when we allow Jesus to change us so that we begin reflecting who we were to reflect, what we were to reflect, the words, the heart. When we allow his work in us, there's this cleansing that begins, and I kind of picture it in the middle of the mirror where you can start to see, like, oh, I think I see the image. It's becoming clearer. And yes, there's still smudges, and there's still some stains, and we'll get to them, and God will work in his timing on those areas. But his work begins, and we start to see more clearly, more and more clearly. This is the picture that God gives us in the New Testament. You're not just instantly made like God's image, and then you mess up and you struggle like, wait, I blew it. I was the image of God, but now I'm not anymore. No, you are that mirror that is being cleared and cleaned. And so it's this process. That's what the metamorphoses say, this transformation. It's a process of becoming more and more and more like the image of Jesus. My focus as your pastor is that you would make this a way of life. That you would fight that urge, that American, that Western world idea that church and faith is about Sunday mornings, that instead you would see this is my purpose in life. To image God in my work, as a parent, in college. As I think about my career, as I dream, that I would be imaging in my relationships. When I travel, that I would be imaging, reflecting who God is. And so some practical suggestions here for you. The more time you spend with Jesus, the more clearly you will reflect him into the world. So first, actually spend time with him. I just told a friend, he just was like, I don't know where to start. I just don't know where to start. I need to in his case, he needed to reconnect with God. And he's a single parent now, and he works 2 jobs. And I said, 4 minutes. Your starting place is 4 minutes a day. 4 minutes a day of uninterrupted focus where you read a promise of God, a truth about God, and then you just talk to him about that. God, work that promise into my life. Start in Psalm chapter 1. Start in any of the Gospels. John is a great place. Luke is a great place to start. And when you hear something about the nature or truth of God, talk for 3.5 minutes after you read that promise. Talk to him. You say 4 minutes isn't a lot. It's almost a half an hour at the end of a week of focused, a half an hour a week of focused, uninterrupted time, and grow from there. Let the 4 minutes turn into 10 minutes. Start with 4. Don't feel like that's too small. It's amazing what will begin to transform inside of you if you give him those 4 minutes, 8 minutes a day, whatever it needs to be for you. And learn how to talk to God and process his truth in community. We don't do community meetups during the week just because we're trying to be super religious and, wow, wouldn't it be great to do more church? No, we do it because we actually want to see God in his image reflectors around us. You see more of him when you're around his people. When people see you, do they see him? Ask this question. These are a couple of questions here. Am I showing others today and this week? Don't think about this generally. Ask it. Put this in your phone. Note this somewhere where regularly you're asking, am I showing others today and this week what God looks like? When I go to work, there's a God imager going into that work. Are people recognizing it? Is there something of God's good or God's patience or God's definition of friendship that they're seeing when they see me? Be specific about your week. Practice his image at school, at work, home, when working out, when dreaming or creating. Who will I reflect God's image to today? That is a great question that I ask myself often. Who is actually seeing God because they hang out with me, or they're near me, or they hear me talk? And then finally, talk to Jesus about this. And here, I'm going to put this on the screen. This is so simple, but this is a powerful prayer. Jesus, please help me know you more as you make me more like you. And so, Jesus, I ask this on behalf of us. Would you please help me know you more as you make me more like you?